And here we go again. Mistakes. They will cost you a lot of money if you do not get on top of them. Today's episode, I want to go through some of the things I've learned over the last 30 years and tell you some of the mistakes I've made. We all make them, and it is, just part of life, but you can learn to manage them so they don't cost you a fortune. So we'll jump in a sec.
Remember the good old days where life seemed such a breeze and all we had to worry about was what time the dinner bell rang or what we were doing later with our friends? Well, how life has changed over the last 30 years. And of course, we decided to make it easier by deciding to be self-employed as a fencing contractor or start our own business. What were we ever thinking? Time moves so fast. Sometimes you gotta work on the ground floor and get amongst the mud with the lads. And other times you have to put on your best shirt and charm it out with the board. Whichever way you choose to do it, there's a hard way and an easier way. Knowledge is power. Knowledge from someone who has already built several fencing businesses and has made all the mistakes and successes you could possibly think of. Could be the only edge you need to get you where you want to go. Be it a sole trader earning six figures or a company structure earning millions. You're listening to the man who has done both from the trenches up and is so passionate about the fencing industry and where it's headed. Now, here's your host, the man who's not afraid to get his hands dirty, Simon Davis, with It's a Fencer's Life, Lessons from the Trenches.
G'day. Simon here. How's everybody's day today? Just wanted to jump on today quickly and let's talk about mistakes. And that's what I alluded to in the intro. We all make mistakes, some more than others, and a lot of them basically are human errors rather than technical errors or rather than robot errors, as we're starting to see a lot of these days. But most of them are human errors, lack of understanding or lack of knowledge or lack of skill level that causes these issues and mistakes, or lack of training could be a big part of it too. So I want to dive in. As I said, we all make mistakes. I made a couple of doozies last week, or the last month, that has cost me quite a substantial amount of money, and simple things that I didn't have in not in play, but just things that didn't work out the way I had planned on a job site, and mistakes were made that cost me in materials more so than anything. The first one was I was doing a big industrial estate, doing a sliding gate, level sliding gate. That's what we had quoted on. We put all the and this is through all the floods as well. So the floods had come through, wiped everything out. I'd gone in, quoted the fence, cleaned up, put a new one in, and the owner had then since backfilled with gravel and levelled his pad out somewhat for everything. So it was a big diplomat fence, and as I said, it was all nice and level and flat when I quoted it. But when we put dug the footing in, we did a big 300 by 600 footing because there was trucks running in and out of the driveway. So we did a big footing for the big sliding gate, and I could not get the sliding gate level for the footing over a 6 metre run. It was running out 150 mil, so over 12 metre opening, it was 300 mil. So to put a level gate in, which I had already ordered, made, got it to site, and I just could not make it work. So I didn't put it back on the owner on this one. I should have probably picked it up and listened a little bit more when I was quoting. He did tell me that he was going to level the area out, but yeah, for some reason it just didn't get quite done to the standard that I was when he said level. It looks level, but yeah, when you put a big gate on it like that, what just didn't work. So that was my error. I could have put it back onto the owner, but I've just chosen, because we do a lot of these things, I've just chosen to suck the cost in for now, lose a little bit on that one because I'll use that gate on one of the next jobs that I've got. So it was a mistake, but we couldn't finish the job off, and it sort of prolonged the job, which then prolongs payments and things like that. So that's one of the big things that you have to be aware of. If you make mistakes and you can't finish the jobs, you can't get your final payments or the final sign-off, then it will hold your payments back, and that does cost you your cash flow. One of the other mistakes I made here not long ago was, again, we had raked panels to be made. Sorry, not raked panels. We had a COLORBOND fence going in. It was a custom-made COLORBOND post and rail with sheets on it, and I was going to step the panels each panel, and then we had 4 dressy ring and spear top 1800 high panels to go intermittent in between 4 spots. So we got them made up. Now those panels cost about $580 each, so plus GST, so it was about $640 or something like that off the top of my head each. So $2,400, I think, $2,460 or something. It cost me all up. When I actually built the job, I then went the other way and decided to cut the sheets. I bought longer sheets and cut them all into the rake to blend it in with the land, because again, it wasn't a lot. It was probably about 70 mil a panel that it was stepping. I thought it'd just look a little bit better on my gut feeling that the client would be a lot more happy. So I've gone to put these 4 panels in, and of course they just won't fit. So it just looked terrible. So I've had to go back and remake 4 panels for it, which cost me another $2,400. So hopefully the 4 panels will be put on the marketplace and just sold off, and they won't cost me too much money on that. But again, it cost me time. I couldn't get the job finished when I thought I was going to, so I've had to move on to another one. And being this time of year, so much happening, you're under the pump all the time. So there's 2 examples of making mistakes that have, one's potentially not going to really hurt me too bad. The other one could if I get to sit on panels for 6 months and they don't sell. So I could lose that sort of money and the cash flow. They will eventually go. They always do, but so I'm not overly worried. But the main point for this is that we all make mistakes. I made that mistake because I was rushing when I was quoting the job. I have been doing a lot of bigger sort of projects, and I've been staying away from the residential for a little bit because it's just been a little bit too hectic for me out on the bigger projects, and I haven't had the time to race in and sort these little ones out. But I decided to chase some of these ones that, this lady actually chased me for months and months, and in the end I just, okay, she's not giving up, so I'll go and do it. So yeah, that was something that has sort of bitten me in the bum a little bit. But I just, this episode's about letting you guys know that, I've been in the game for 30 years and I still make mistakes on occasion. So don't beat yourself up about it when you're doing things, and something just sort of goes awry a little bit. I get the feeling that when you guys are starting out and you make mistakes, you're answering the phone to take on any possible job that you can because you need the work. And I understand that. I used to do the same thing until you can sort of build yourself up a little repertoire of typical works that you want to chase, and you build up your brand, then you've got to sort of do that. But if you're taking work on that, or you're rushing to get through your jobs to get into another job, this is when you'll start to have mistakes made. Now, one of the things I do really want to emphasize here is on some of the other jobs that we've made mistakes on. Now, when I was on the ground myself with my teams, my labourers for probably 12 years, 13 years, we did not have a callback at all. We didn't have a callback for any jobs at all because I was sort of managing the quality on everything else. when I expanded and I sort of got back to sit in the office a little bit more and had extra staff on, then our callback rates went up significantly. And that was because the clients weren't happy. There was things just not done to my standard that weren't, that the clients were picking, and they just weren't happy. So we had to implement systems into the business then of how we did things. Now, that was the start of our introduction to our paperwork cycle. And at the time, we were going for our national quality ISO 9001 standard. And we were putting all the systems in place for that. So everything was scrutinized, and we lost a lot of that sort of natural flow of work that we were doing because, as I said, everything was so scrutinized, and everything had to be by the book, and we had to write templates on this is how you do this job, and these are the steps you do it. These are the pictures that this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. We went right through from ground zero all the way to completion of the job, packing up and getting back to the yard and to the shop. Lot of steps, a lot of moving parts, and I really don't. Most of us do that naturally, but when you've got other people who are coming in and haven't been in that system, then it's a big learning curve. So we'll just run off to a break for a second. I'll just have a sip of coffee.
Stay with us. The Fencer's Life podcast will be right back.
So, yeah, going back to that's how I was introduced to systems and paperwork and having things done.
Stay with us. The Fencer's Life podcast will be right back.
Not sure what happened there. That was a bit of a doozy. Yeah, so going back to that, sorry about that. Going back to that system and that paperwork, we had to implement those for quality control to make sure we knew what was standard and what was substandard and what we could get away with and what we couldn't. And many years ago, I had a business coach we hired, and we went through a lot of things. And there's one thing that I can remember. He taught me a lot of things, which I was very, very grateful for. But one thing he told me, and he said to me, never let perfect get in the way of good. And that used to really rile me up the wall because I was a perfectionist and I had to have everything down to the, all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and the job site was just immaculate. And I suppose it's a little bit of my OCD, but screws all level and things like that. And so I was very painfully skeptical on a lot of things that were happening. And when the mistakes started to come in, and I was then, because I was sitting in charge, the onus would stop with me. So people would go and make mistakes. They'd lose materials. They'd lose different things, lose tools, and stuff up a job. Without proper processes and systems in place, you open slather. It's just doesn't work. And another example, I hired a team that I didn't do my background research. I knew the fella. He told me they were fencing with him. They were good fencers. And so I put them on a big job, or a timber paling job it was at the time, 30, 40 metres. And they made a dog's breakfast out of it. And I had to kick them off the site, and I sacked him immediately and had to go and get another team to come in and finish the work. Now, one of the things I found with that side of things is, because I was so hands-on, as soon as the mistakes were made or things like that, I was the one that was going back out to manage the site or fix the stuff up or whatever. So that was taking my time away from running the business and doing what I had to do. And one of my roles as a manager or owner of the business was finding new works and finding bigger tenders and things like that we were chasing at the time. So that's what I was good at. Not necessarily running around fixing, mistakes that blokes couldn't put palings in the right way, or they had scratches all over colour-line sheets or things like that. Just silly stuff that should have been fixed up, but never were, because at the time we didn't have the systems in place, and so that's how we invented that side of things. Now, one of the other steps we put into play for the systems was quality sign-off sheets. So when I went to the highway work, that was one of the big things that they were on top of me about all the time. So we had to have the correct paperwork and everything else. And I struggled with that for a long time. I'll be honest, I said to the engineers when we did the job that I can do the job standing on my head. I had blokes everywhere, had subbies everywhere. That was the easy part. Handling the paperwork was the hard part. Doing the spreadsheets, working out what was what, doing the pre-ordering, all of that stuff, even running the safety side. Now, we were on one job site for nearly 4 years. For 3.5 years, 3 years, we didn't have a safety issue at all. Then we had new contractors come in, and even though they were inducted into our system and everything else that we had, they still did two sets of contractors actually. They still did a few things that were not quite up to standard and against the rules of the site we were on, and I got hauled through the coals. So one of them was the job site we had. They had a batter or a slope policy. You couldn't work your machines on a gradient more than 30 degrees or something like that. I can't remember the exact degrees of whatever it was. No, it wasn't 30 degrees. It might have been 15 degrees. But we weren't allowed to go up and down slopes, basically. That was the nuts and bolts of it. We could traverse up the drains and run machines up there, and a lot of our fencing was up on top of batters and buns and slopes and things like that. So we were running stuff up there. I was away at the time. I had finished the contractor had finished his portion of work that he had done, and he was looking for the next section to do. So I rang my supervisor and said, can you get him onto the next job, blah, blah, blah. Not a problem. And all that went well. He was told where to run the machine. He could run up the drain. He was carrying, in a posi track, carrying posts up and down the slope to get them up on top of the ridge cap that we had to fence off. And then he decided in his own wisdom that wasn't quick enough, so he could go straight down the batter. Now, normally that wouldn't have worried me too much, but he done it in front of the engineers' works compound, the depot, and where all the safety officers were meeting. So, as I said, I was away at the time, and I get a phone call to come back and sort this mess out. And me and my manager, a couple of managers, we went into a safety meeting, and they threw the book at me. They really went off their brain and said I didn't take safety serious enough and all this blah, 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 and really sort of hammered me. And that was a learning curve for me, because, they're hammering me and I wasn't even on the site, and, the contractor did the wrong thing, and, they get away with it, all got kicked off site, and he just went on to another job. Whereas we were on that site, and we got, I think we got kicked off site for 5 months, which cost us a lot of money. At the time I was on that job site, I was probably doing $110,000 a month in revenue with the crew I had. So that potentially cost us $500,000 in revenue and cash flow for something that I didn't do and was out of my hands, but a bloke took it on himself. So there's one mistake that cost us quite a lot, and it happens. There's other things that I could go in that, complacency takes a lot of issues on on big work sites and things that you're doing all the time. And there was another job that I did for the education system, and we were digging holes with a little mini digger, one of the ones you stand behind, and little dingo or whatever you want to call them. And I was digging holes, and I always used to dig backwards. So I dig the hole in front of me, drive backwards, reverse backwards, dig the next hole, and I'd keep going down that way. So every time I stepped off the machine to clean the holes out, there was no damage. And I got to one of the 2 or 3 last holes. It had just turned recess or little play lunch for the kids at school. We were out of high school. They'd all come out, and I had a buffer zone between me and them. I had security fence, and so I was working in that sort of alleyway, and there was a tree in the way, and I could not get to where I needed to dig the hole. So I turned the opposite way, dug the hole, and then didn't think, just habit, stepping off the machine to grab the diggers to clean out the hole, the clappers that I call them, to dig out the hole, and I stood right leg straight into a 900 deep hole, 300 wide. So when I fell, I was up to my mid thigh bone, I suppose, and I grabbed the machine to stop me from falling back, and managed to grab the controls of the machine and pull the machine straight over the top of me, and let out this almighty scream, and the machine bent my leg like a banana, and I thought it was going to snap my thigh bone, and I was very, very lucky. So whilst I'm screaming, there's another fella on site who was with me. He came to try and lift the machine off me. So the only way he could do that was he put the auger down onto the ground, the tip of the auger, and all that did was push the weight back onto the top of my thigh bone. So here I am screaming, there's kids everywhere and carrying on, and it basically didn't break my leg, but skinned my leg pretty savagely up the thigh bone, and it didn't had a big gravel rash or burn mark on that, where it took all the skin off for probably 6 months. So that was a really good one, and I'm sure you guys have got plenty of stories to tell me, and just those things of rushing, not thinking fully, and being fully present in the moment when you change your mind on something or change the way you're doing things is a massive learning curve. Was a massive learning curve for me, and obviously for you guys who are out there on the ground every day as well. You've just got to be aware that these things will happen.
Welcome back to the Fencer's Life Podcast.
So one of the other things, guys, that another accident that happened on my watch. Again, another highway job. Had a young fella in the posi track digging holes, pushing posts, and again we had a rule on the highways that the 1530 rule. So anything that was I think it was anything that was wheeled, you weren't allowed within 15 metres of. Anything that was tracked, you weren't allowed within 30 metres of. It might have been the other way around. Tracked 15 and wheeled 30, I can't quite remember. They, again, was another big mishap. We had an exception to the rule because we were digging, augering holes all the time, and there was people around the auger to stabilise the auger to punch in the holes, but also to clean the holes out once the machine had moved off, or rake the dirt away. We used to rake the dirt, the spoils, off around the auger as it was digging, just so everything didn't fall back in. So we just speed things up a little bit. So we had an exception to that. on one job site, they made us put a green light on the machine. So every time the green light was on, somebody could go to the machine. Every time the green light was off, you weren't allowed near it. And that worked quite well, actually. But this fellow was cleaning out his hole. He was had the posi track with the auger on it. He had gone over a bund, a little bund that was only probably half a metre high by probably a metre wide, and he was sitting on top rocking as he was sort of going over that and had to dig the next hole. So as he's gone over that, he started the next hole off or whatever. I don't know what happened. He told me that he reached for his tape measure, or a packet of smokes or something, and his sleeve got caught on the joystick and got caught sort of big thing here, and he's bumped it. Well, anyway, the auger flicked up and hit the labourer, who had a hard hat on, thank goodness, hit him on the top of the head with the point of the auger and split his eye, and ended up with 15 stitches. That, again, human error. As I said, this is what I'm alluding to. A lot of things are human error and doing things that outside of our normal go-to that happens, and mistakes happen. People get injured. So again, a little bit of complacency was put there. We got a bit of a slap on the wrist with that one too. Same job site, 3 months later, we were falling behind a little bit, so they gave us it had been really, really wet, so everybody was behind, but the company we were working for gave us a posi track operator and a machine to just race in a few holes and run concrete for us, actually, I think it was, with his machine. Now, we had a flagged area that we weren't allowed to go outside of, and we were working the flagged area was a no-go zone. We were a couple of metres inside it, doing our fence line, working away, and this fellow couldn't get to where we needed to with the concrete, so he's just dropped the flag, gone out around the no-go zone, and dropped around. I think he drove 5 metres out of the no-go zone and screwed the machine around, come back in, got caught doing it. That ended up nearly a court case and EPA breach, level 5 EPA breach, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, because somebody had gone outside that no-go zone and the flagged area. And of course, they tried to throw the book at me for that one. And I fought that one quite successfully because we didn't ask for the fellow to come in and do anything. They offered us to it. It was his machine, and he had been inducted by that company. He was actually on their payroll, so it wasn't even anything to do with us, basically. So I got away with that one. But we had the head honchos for the New South Wales government, the EPA board, and everything, really having a crack at us, trying to point the finger at us, and they took that actually more serious than the fellow who got hit on the head with the auger. Which just that blew me away. Actually, that was quite detrimental to my sanity, that one, because I thought people's health was a lot more better off, but than a bit of grass that was sort of ripped up in a bit of mud. So again, there are a couple of the incidences that I've had over my time. Two mistakes. One mistake caused by me, another one caused by a supplier, 2 or 3 caused by staff, and a couple caused by subbies, and it happens. You can't be everywhere all the time. But the one thing to save yourself is the paperwork. Okay, so if you have paperwork that is signed off for quality when you do your job and you're finished, and the owner signs it, that's great. If you have, we all have incident accident reports, or you should have, but if that happens and you're signing that off, a lot of the times, some of the things that we went through, these engineers and the safety fellows were quite good. They were very good on some occasions. There have been other occasions where they've sat back, taken photos and said, "Oh, your blokes are doing the wrong thing." And I said, "Well, if they're doing the wrong thing, go up and educate them and tell them they're doing the wrong thing. Don't take photos of it and then send it to an email to me and haul my ass into the office and have a chew out at me, because there's 3-4 days have gone past. I don't even know what they've done." So that was a little bit conflicting for me, because that side of things too is you're doing your job to the best of your ability, and sometimes these other jokers don't make it necessarily easy for you. But then we used to have a lot of meetings with the head honchos, and the thing was, when the pressure got put on that they were running behind time and you had to move really quickly and do this and do that, a lot of the meetings were about the safety has to stay and you can't cut corners or do this, rah, rah. But then everybody would turn a blind eye, and it was just shut up, get your job done, and as quick as you can. So there's very conflicting areas there. I was at a meeting on another highway job just at Christmas time, just before I think the highway was opening in early January. Everybody was just pulling out at Christmas, and we were doing fauna culverts at the time, and there was the rule on the site you weren't allowed to use step ladders, and there was blokes doing underpasses, another company doing underpasses, and putting fauna crossovers, so they were like a timber structure, so the possums could run through the out of the water and run through the underpasses and get away from the wild dogs or foxes or whatever was chasing them. So this bloke was putting them in, and his company was there, and you're always reaching for something or doing something, but platform ladders were the go, not allowed to use a step ladder. He had to put a screw in above his head, just out of reach, and he stood on a bucket. And this safety meeting officer, there was 300 gentlemen and ladies there. We're just about to knock off for Christmas. I think it was a week before Christmas, and this safety officer was going on, you can't do this, you can't do that, rah, rah, rah. And this young fella got up and said, "Well, you're supposed to be supplying us these safety platform ladders, and there's none around, and you're holding us up. We need to keep sort of working to get this highway open and get it moving, and you guys are holding us up." And this safety officer quietly just said, "No, that's okay. That is our job. We'll get you the safety platform ladders, rah, rah." 10 minutes later, when the meeting had dispersed, I happened to be standing close to this young fellow, and I heard the safety officer come in and he said, "Mate," the safety officer pointed to him and said, "You pack your bags. I've already rang your boss. You're off site, and your whole company's gone. You're just not obeying by the rules." And he dropped him like that. So